Okay, Daisy, what's tip number 2, please?
So tip number 2 follows on from review every lesson plan. Tip number 2 is ask a question at the end of every lesson that every student should be able to get right. And this was something I started doing following on from reviewing every lesson plan. Because you think, well, if I want the students to be thinking about this, and this is the thing I want them to be thinking about, in a sense, I'm trying to be really precise about what it is I want them to be thinking about. And if that's worked, if they really have been thinking about the thing I wanted, they should really all be able to answer a certain question by the end of the lesson that I've decided at the beginning, this is the question I want them to be able to answer. And when I first started doing that, I thought, yeah, this should be really easy. Actually, there should be 10 or 15 questions they should all be able to answer and get right. And then you do it, and then in this way, it's a sort of blow for kind of how, what you're teaching, the reality of your teaching as opposed to what you think it is that you can end up asking a really, really simple question that you think, surely you must have got this, and, 3/4 of the class get it wrong. So I think if you decide up front, if there's just one thing that I want them all to walk away knowing that they didn't know at the start, what would that be? It really focuses your mind with the planning. And it focuses your mind and makes you think, okay, this one thing, this one question. And that might even be if you're introducing a new novel, if you're introducing a new text or you're reading a chapter of a text, it might just be like the main plot point in that chapter. It might just be the main new character who's introduced. So it could be something. So the other point about this is, it's one of these things that people think, oh, this is too trivial. But it's meant to be it's not designed to be tricksy. It's meant to be easy. It's meant to be something that 100% of students can get right. And actually, I think you'll actually find you really struggle to find one thing, but it really focuses your teaching. It makes your teaching think like this. I want them to know this one thing. Obviously, you don't want it to turn into I spend the 60-minute lesson just regurgitating this one thing. But as I say, if you're doing it in the context of say a novel where you're reading the next chapter, or you're looking at a particular character, is there one thing at the end of this I want everyone to get right? What would that be? And just being really focused on that. And maybe, if you go further and further along, you can do 2 or 3 questions. But I think it's a really nice thing that really focuses your teaching and planning.
I love this, Daisy. Right, again, same thing, 2 quick observations on this, and then a follow-up question for you. The first is, this reminds me when Dylan William was on the show a few weeks back saying about how making question planning central to lesson planning. And this feels like fits in really nicely with that. So when you're thinking about your lesson, almost starting in a sense with this final question that you want everyone to be able to answer, and how do you shape the lesson around how to get to that point? So that feels like that fits really nicely. Second observation, I've messed this up as well, Daisy, in the past, which is the last question I've asked kids in a lesson is always the hardest question. It's like it builds up to this. And that's quite bad because but a load of the kids don't get it right, so they feel crap about themselves. And also, I haven't got a real good sense of how the majority of kids have understand the core element of the lesson, because I haven't assessed that at the end. I've assessed something different, almost like the challenge or the extension. So I like the idea of not ending on the hardest question, but ending on a question that kind of assesses the core knowledge, the thing that you really wanted all the kids to get. So I really like that. But my kind of follow-up question to you on this is, how does this fit in with exit tickets, Daisy? Would this be an exit ticket? And what's your view generally on exit tickets? How do you see this question being asked and playing out at the end of the lesson?
Yes, I think it can work in a number of different ways. I think it could be an exit ticket, it can be a mini whiteboard. I agree with what you said about too often you're kind of building up the lesson, it's getting more complicated, and then the thing you do at the end is like the challenge. And actually, almost in some ways, it's better maybe to do a question at the end that recalls something a bit more basic from the beginning, and then it functions as a bit of retrieval practice. It's almost like your first retrieval. And even if it was something simple that they got halfway through the lesson or a third of the way into the lesson, well, if it's an hour-long lesson, 30 or 40 minutes might have passed since they did that. So it's worth just refreshing it at the end, even if it's really simple. So I think the challenge always at the end of the lesson is leaving enough time. I always found that I would rush. You run out of time towards the end, and it's really important to get it in, and then you're rushing and the bell's ringing. So I think it's really important to give it enough time at the end. And I think, again, with exit ticket, mini whiteboard, whatever kind of works for you. But I would go back to the first principle of, not getting massively complicated structures around it, and trying to keep it as simple and repeatable and almost as a routine as possible. So, I think mini whiteboards in maths work really well. And I've seen them work really well. Sometimes it can be slightly trickier in English, because you're maybe looking for a full sentence. You're looking for something, it might not be right. They obviously can work, but I can understand that there might be reasons why you want something a little bit different. So I think, find something that works for you, that's repeatable, and that isn't, the admin of it doesn't take up too much time. You can also do, if you want to do a multiple choice question, you can do that on a mini whiteboard. You can do that even simpler, just 5 options, raise your hand, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that doesn't require any kind of special equipment at all. But you then, if it's a multiple choice question, you've got to have really thought of it before. You can't just come up with that on the fly.
Yeah. Just on that, just as a slight aside, I'm obviously obsessed with diagnostic multiple choice questions, but I think they work really well as this final question in a lesson because they're quick to get the kids' responses, and if you identify a problem, you've got a better insight as to why it's a problem based on the specific answers the kids have given. And if the vast majority of kids get it right, you can then turn your attention to the wrong answers to start thinking, well, why is this wrong, and so on. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. You get your assessment done quickly, and then you've got a kind of path to go if there's trouble, and then also a natural path to go if the understanding's there. So I'm completely biased, of course, but I like using diagnostic questions for egg tickets. I think they work quite well as that final question in a lesson, if that makes sense.
Definitely. I think that works well as well. Definitely.
You're legally obliged to say that, Daisy, so that's good to hear. So that's good. All right.